The snow had been falling over Toronto for 4 days without stopping, the kind of slow, relentless snow that didn't announce itself with storms but simply accumulated, quietly burying everything underneath a white that looked almost peaceful if you didn't have to sleep in it. Lena Marsh pressed her back against the concrete pillar outside the Bay Street Parkade and pulled her daughter closer. Abby was 6 years old and had stopped asking where they were going 2 days ago. That silence worried Lena more than the cold did. They had been sleeping in the Parkade for 11 nights. 3rd floor, northeast corner, beside a heating vent that only worked between 11 at night and 4 in the morning. Lena had memorized the schedule the way she used to memorize surgical procedures, back when she had a schedule, back when she had a hospital and a badge and a reason to set an alarm. She had been a surgical nurse at Toronto General for 9 years. People trusted her with their lives, literally handed her their unconscious bodies, and trusted that when they woke up, she would have made sure everything went right. She had been good at it. She had loved it with the kind of love you don't talk about at parties because it sounds too serious, too much like a calling. And then Marcus happened. Or rather, Marcus revealed himself, slowly, the way rot works, from the inside out, invisible until it wasn't. She had married him at 28, certain she had found someone steady. He was a contracts lawyer, methodical, charming in a quiet way, the kind of man her mother would have approved of. For 2 years it was fine. For the 3rd year it was fine with a strange undertone she couldn't name. By year 4, the undertone had a name, but she was too afraid to say it out loud. By year 5, she had said it to a police officer, who wrote it down carefully and then explained what her options were with the patience of someone who had explained those options many times before and watched many women go home anyway. She went home anyway. He had Abby, he had the apartment, he had the lawyer friends who made things disappear. She left for the last time on a Tuesday in November with Abby in a backpack carrier and 1 duffel bag and her nursing credentials in a waterproof pouch inside her coat. Marcus had moved quickly. She still didn't know how he had managed it. The nursing board complaint, the temporary suspension, the frozen bank account. He had told her once that he knew people, and she had not understood what that meant until she had nothing. The emergency shelter on Sherbourne had a 3-week wait list. The second one had a no-children policy. The church basement on Carlton let them sleep for 4 nights, and then very gently told her the space was needed for a men's group. She had thanked them and taken Abby back out into December. The Parkade had been a mistake she couldn't afford to correct. The morning she met Vincent Caruso, she had sent Abby with the woman from the next pillar over, a retired schoolteacher named Pat who had lost her condo to a predatory lender and seemed to know everything about surviving winter in a Parkade, and walked 3 blocks to the food bank on Adelaide. She got there 40 minutes before it opened and stood in the line that had already formed, stamping her feet, watching her breath disappear into the grey morning. The building beside the food bank was one of those glass towers that looked like it was trying to touch something it would never reach. She had passed it a dozen times without looking at it. This morning, for no reason she could explain, she looked up. There was a man on the 10th floor, standing at the floor-to-ceiling window with a coffee cup in his hand, looking down at the street. She couldn't see his face clearly, only the outline of him. Dark jacket, dark hair, the posture of someone who had spent a long time being the tallest person in any room. She looked away. The line moved. She got her box of groceries and walked back to the Parkade. She did not know he had watched her the entire time she was in that line. She did not know he had put down his coffee and stood at that window for the full 40 minutes, watching this woman in a too-thin coat stand very straight in the cold, with the particular stillness of someone who was holding themselves together through sheer concentration. She did not know that something about that stillness had reminded him of his sister. His name was Vincent Caruso, and he owned the building. He also owned the 3 buildings adjacent to it, 2 more in Yorkville, a hotel in Mississauga, and a private security firm that people whispered about with a combination of fear and respect. He had built all of it from the ground up, starting with nothing except an inheritance from a father he hadn't spoken to in 15 years, and a talent for reading people that would have made him either very rich or very dangerous, and had, in the end, made him both. He was 41 years old. His sister had been 33 when she died. Her name had been Julia, and she had also stood very straight in bad situations, and it had also not saved her. He didn't like to think about Julia. He thought about her every day. He called his operations manager, a careful man named Bernard who had worked for him for 11 years, and asked him to find out about the woman in the food bank line. Bernard found out. It took him 2 days. When he laid the file on Vincent's desk, Vincent read it in silence without touching his coffee. Lena Marsh, age 31, formerly registered nurse, surgical unit, Toronto General, Currently suspended pending investigation. Complaint filed by her estranged husband Marcus Calloway, associate at Calloway and Pierce. One daughter, Abigail, age 6. No fixed address. Vincent sat with the file for a long time. Then he said, Bernard found her the next morning. Vincent went himself. He pulled up to the Parkade entrance in a car that probably cost more than the building she'd been sleeping in was worth, got out and asked Bernard to wait. He walked up 3 flights of concrete stairs in the cold with his hands in his pockets and found her the way Bernard had described. Northeast corner beside the vent, cross-legged on a flattened cardboard box, doing something methodical with a small first aid kit while her daughter slept against her side, wrapped in an emergency thermal blanket. He stopped about 10 feet away. She heard him before she saw him and was on her feet in half a second, the first aid kit closed and behind her back, her body angled between him and the sleeping child, with a look on her face that was not quite fear. It was more experience than fear. It was assessment. "Who are you?" she said. Not a question, a demand. "My name is Vincent Caruso," he said. "I own the building across the street. I watched you in the food bank line 2 mornings ago. You watched me." "I did. I'm sorry, it wasn't. I wasn't." He stopped. He was not accustomed to explaining himself, and the lack of practice showed. "I recognized something, in the way you were standing, and I asked someone to look into your situation." The look on her face went somewhere sharp. "You investigated me. I found out your name and what happened to you." "Yes, and now you're here, and now I'm here." She studied him the way she probably studied patients, clinically, quickly, cataloging data. He didn't look away. He had nothing to hide in his face right now, and he wanted her to see that. "What do you want?" she said. "To offer you something. You can say no. I want you to know that first. You can say no and I will leave and you will never see me again. What are you offering? A place to stay. Clean, safe, private. A place for you and your daughter. And a conversation about what comes next, if you want to have it." Lena looked at him for a very long moment. The heating vent clicked on below them with a hollow mechanical sound. Her daughter turned in her sleep and made a small sound, and Lena's hand moved automatically toward her, one reflex, one gesture that told him everything about what mattered. "Why?" she said. Vincent looked at her. "Because I can," he said. "Because someone should have helped you before it got to this, and they didn't, and you're still standing anyway, and that means something." He paused. "And because I had a sister who needed someone to help her stand and no one did, and I am tired of being the kind of man who could have helped and didn't." Lena said nothing. The snow outside the Parkade was still falling. She looked at her daughter, then she looked at him. "1 hour," she said. "I'll hear you out for 1 hour, and then I decide." "That's all I'm asking," he said. She woke Abby gently, the way you wake a child who is used to being woken in uncertain places, quietly, with a hand on the shoulder and a soft word, no sudden movements. Abby sat up and looked at Vincent with the frank assessment of a 6-year-old who has learned that not all adults are safe. "Who's that?" Abby said. "Someone who says he wants to help us," Lena said. "We're going to find out if he's telling the truth." Abby looked at him for another moment and then said, "Okay," with the pragmatism of a child who has had to become practical far too early. Vincent had a driver. Lena sat in the back with Abby on her lap and her duffel bag between her feet and her hands very still. The car was warm. Abby fell asleep again in 10 minutes, the way children can, completely, without reservation, the way Lena had forgotten how to. The apartment was on the 14th floor of a building in King West. Quiet building. Good locks. Lena noticed the locks immediately. Hardwood, clean. A second bedroom with a bed already made up with soft yellow sheets that she suspected had been put there in the last 2 hours. There was food in the kitchen. She checked the fridge before she did anything else, not because she was hungry right then, but because she needed to know it was real. It was real. She stood at the window with Abby finally sleeping properly in the back bedroom and waited for Vincent Caruso to tell her what any of this was going to cost her. He sat across the room in a chair and did not come any closer than she had positioned herself from him. "Tell me what happened," he said. "I read a file, but a file is not a story." Lena thought about refusing. Then she thought about the last 11 nights, she told him. All of it. The way she had never told anyone all of it. Not even the police officer who had taken the report in year 4. She told him about the first time Marcus had held her car keys and said he just didn't think she should go out tonight. She told him about the nursing board complaint, which was fabricated. She was certain of it. But proving fabrication when the person who filed it knows every procedural mechanism available was another matter entirely. She told him about Abby, about how Marcus had been warm with Abby, had never been anything but warm with Abby, which was its own particular cruelty because it meant she could never point to anything concrete when people asked. Vincent listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer reassurances. He simply listened with the quality of attention that Lena associated with people who understood that the greatest thing you could give someone telling a hard story was the certainty that they were actually being heard. When she finished, she felt wrung out and lighter at the same time, a combination she had not expected. "Your nursing license," Vincent said. "The complaint that was filed, what would it take to address it?" Lena looked at him. "The investigation has to run its course, takes 8 months minimum. And Marcus knows people on the board. Not all of them, but some people who can be reached," Vincent said, more to himself than to her. "I don't want," she started. "I'm not talking about anything illegal," he said, and she believed him, which surprised her. "I'm talking about people who have been wanting a reason to look more carefully at Marcus Calloway for some time. He has made enemies, Ms. Marsh. Men who operate carefully tend to collect them." He stood. "Stay here, both of you. Take the week. Rest. Let your daughter sleep in a bed." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "There's something else. I own a clinic on the east side. Ron says Val's, we serve families who don't have access to regular health care, new arrivals, low-income households, people between systems. We need a nurse with surgical experience. If at any point you want to work, the position is there." Lena stared at him. "You're offering me a job. I'm telling you the job exists. You don't have to take it. You don't have to do anything except rest." He left. Lena stood in the quiet apartment for a very long time. Then she went and lay down beside Abby on the yellow sheets, and for the first time in 11 nights, she slept. If you're watching this, and you've ever stood in a line in the cold, wondering how you got there, wondering how the life you built became the thing you were running from, then I want you to know, keep watching, because what happened next changed everything, and I don't want you to miss it. Subscribe to Heart Boss and stay with me until the end. She started at the clinic on the 8th day. She had not intended to start so soon. She had told herself she would take the full week, would let Abby settle, would spend the time getting her bearings. But by the 5th day she had cleaned the apartment twice, reorganized the small kitchen 3 times, and was waking at 4 in the morning with the energy of someone whose body had been trained to be useful and didn't know what to do with rest. She called the number Vincent had left. The clinic was a low building on a side street near Roncesvalles, painted dark green, with a hand-lettered sign and a ramp built from what looked like reclaimed wood. It opened at 7 in the morning, and the waiting room was full by 7:15. The head nurse, a woman named Sandra who had been working there for 6 years and had opinions about everything and delivered them pleasantly and without hesitation, showed Lena around in under 20 minutes and then handed her a chart and said, "Room 3, child with fever. Mother speaks Tagalog and some English. The translation app is on the tablet on the counter." That was the interview. Lena worked it like she had worked every shift at Toronto General. One patient at a time, completely. The woman in room 3 with the feverish toddler looked at Lena's hands the way patients do, checking for steadiness, checking for hurry. And Lena let her look, held still, smiled, and then got to work. By noon, she had seen 11 patients. By the time the clinic closed at 5, she had seen 23. Her feet ached. Her hands knew exactly where they were. She walked out into the cold, late afternoon light and felt, for the first time in months, like herself. Vincent came to the clinic on Thursdays. He came quietly, through the back, and did not announce himself. He stocked shelves, fixed things, played cards with the older patients waiting for their appointments. He brought coffee for the staff. Real coffee, from the good place on Queen, not the clinic's instant, and he never made a production of any of it. Lena watched him without meaning to. She noticed the way he spoke to people, directly, without the performance of warmth that people in his position often used. She noticed that he remembered names, that he asked questions and listened to the answers. She noticed that he was different here than she imagined him being anywhere else, like a frequency had shifted. She did not say any of this to anyone. She filed it away in the careful part of her mind where she kept the things she wasn't ready to examine. On the 4th Thursday, he appeared in the doorway of the small break room where she was eating a sandwich and doing paperwork. "How is it going?" he said. "Good," she said, and meant it in a way that she did not fully understand until she heard herself say it. He poured himself a coffee and leaned against the counter, not invading her space, and they talked for 20 minutes about a patient she'd been worried about, an elderly man named Frank, who had been coming in for 3 weeks with a cough that Lena suspected was masking something larger, and what resources existed in the system to get him to a specialist without a 3-month wait. It was a clinical conversation, and it was also somehow the best conversation she had had in 4 years. She drove home in the car Vincent had arranged. She had argued about this, had said she would take the streetcar, and he had said that was fine, and then Bernard had appeared the next morning anyway, and eventually she had stopped arguing. and sat in the back watching the city go by and thought about what it meant to be surprised by kindness that did not ask for anything back. She had almost convinced herself it was possible when Marcus found her. She was at the clinic. It was a Tuesday 11 in the morning. She looked up from the chart in her hands and he was standing on the sidewalk outside the window, in the same expensive coat he'd worn to her last performance review at Toronto General, when he had shown up without warning and stood in the hallway making the nursing manager laugh at his jokes while Lena felt the wattles of her throat close. He looked older, or she was looking at him differently. She did not flinch. She did not move toward the window. She turned to Sandra and said, very quietly, "I need you to call Bernard Leclerc. His number is in my phone under B. Tell him where I am. Tell him who is outside." Sandra looked at her face and asked no questions. She took the phone. Lena walked to the back of the clinic and stood in the room where they kept the supply carts and put her hands flat on the metal shelf and breathed. She had done this so many times. Hidden in rooms. Pressed her palms against surfaces and remembered how to breathe. She had thought it was over. She had let herself think it was over. Bernard arrived in 12 minutes. Vincent arrived in 17. He came in through the back door. He looked at her hands on the shelf and her breathing, which she had gotten under control, and he did not touch her and did not speak immediately, and she was grateful for both of those things. "He's still outside," she said. "I know. I saw him on the way in." His voice was even. "Do you want to leave through the back? I can take you and Abby somewhere he won't find you tonight." "I'm tired of leaving through the back," Lena said. The words surprised her as she said them. Vincent looked at her. "Tell me what you want." She straightened up. Her hands came off the shelf. She thought about Abby, who had slept for 9 nights in a real bed and had started drawing again. Pictures of the clinic, pictures of the apartment window with the snow outside, pictures that looked like a child who had begun to feel safe. "I want it to be over," she said. "Not managed, not survived." "Over then, let's end it," Vincent said. He had a lawyer. Of course he did. Several, it turned out. But the one who mattered was a woman named Catherine Osei, who specialized in cases involving institutional complaints and bad faith legal maneuvers by people who thought their connections made them untouchable. Catherine had been watching Marcus Calloway for 2 years. She told Lena when they met that evening in Vincent's building, for reasons unrelated to Lena but very much related to a pattern of behavior that extended well beyond one suspended nursing license. "He has done this before," Catherine said. She was direct, precise, the kind of person who said difficult things without cushioning them because she respected the people she was saying them to. Not identically, but the structure is the same. He finds a pressure point, and he uses it. The nursing board complaint is the cleanest example we have, but it's not the only one. Lena felt something settle in her chest. Not quite relief, something older than relief. Vindication, maybe. The confirmation that she had not been wrong, had not been weak, had not simply failed to cope with a difficult marriage. She had been targeted by someone who was good at it. "What do we need?" Lena said. "From you? A formal statement. Everything you told Vincent in writing, in detail, and access to your employment records from Toronto General, which we can subpoena if Marcus has already gotten there first." "He has," Lena said. "He would have. Then we subpoena them." Catherine closed her folder. "He thinks he controls the timeline. He doesn't. Not anymore. It took 3 weeks. Lena went to work and came home to Abby and did not look out the windows more than necessary. She gave her statement to Catherine in 4 sessions that left her tired in a way she recognized from the worst nights at the hospital. Not physically tired, but the tiredness of having been completely present for something that cost something. Marcus came to the clinic once more. He stood on the sidewalk for 40 minutes and then left. Bernard's team was there. He knew they were there. That was the point. The morning it ended, Lena was giving a patient instructions for a blood pressure medication when her phone buzzed. Catherine. She finished with the patient, handed him the printed instructions, walked him to the door, and then stepped into the break room and called back. "The board has dropped the complaint," Catherine said. "Withdrawn. Insufficient evidence, which is the official language for what happens when the evidence that does exist points the wrong direction. Your license will be reinstated within 30 days. Lena sat down. "There's more," Catherine said. "2 of Marcus's clients have filed formal complaints with the Law Society. One of his senior partners has been cooperating with an inquiry that has nothing to do with you but has everything to do with why he needed you discredited. He's not untouchable, Lena. He never was. He just needed someone to find the seam. The divorce," Lena said. "Filed this morning. He's not contesting it. His lawyers advised him not to." Catherine paused. "He's also agreed to the support terms." Lena put the phone face down on the table and sat very still. She was not crying. She did not feel like crying. She felt the way she sometimes felt at the end of a very long surgery. When everything had gone right and the patient was stable, and someone turned off the overhead light, and you became aware of your own hands again, aware of your own breath, aware that you had done the thing and it was done and it was time to come back to yourself. She called Vincent. I heard, he said, before she could speak. Of course he had. Thank you, she said. There was a pause. You did the hard part, he said. You stayed standing long enough for the rest of it to be possible. She told Sandra first, because Sandra had handed her a chart on her first morning without asking a single question and had never asked one since. Sandra said that was excellent, and could Lena please cover room 2 because they had a patient with a laceration who needed stitching. She covered room 2. That evening, Vincent was still at the clinic when she finished her last chart. He was in the waiting room helping an older woman from the Tibetan community fill out a provincial health card renewal form, his reading glasses on, the form spread between them on the coffee table. He looked up when Lena came through. He walked her out. The evening was cold and clear, the kind of winter evening in Toronto that surprises you with its beauty if you're not underwater. The streetcar trundled past on Roncesvalles, orange and lit up, trailing a few sparks. I have a question, Lena said. All right, the apartment, the car, the lawyer, the clinic. She turned to look at him. What did any of this cost you? Vincent considered the question. Less than you might think. More than the accounting suggests. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It isn't. He looked at the streetcar disappearing down the road. My sister's name was Julia. She was a pediatric physiotherapist. She left a difficult situation, not unlike yours, and she was too proud to ask for help and too frightened to know who to ask, and she made one bad decision trying to manage alone, and she did not recover from it. He was quiet for a moment. I had the money to help her even then. I just didn't know she needed it until it was too late. Lena did not say she was sorry. He did not need her to. So you find people, she said. I try to, he said. I'm better at it than I used to be. I notice the way people stand in line. Lena looked at him, this man who had watched her from a window and decided that her posture in a food bank line was worth doing something about, this man who brought coffee and fixed things and remembered names, and had never once made her feel like she owed him anything. Your mother, she said. What was she like? Vincent smiled, and she saw something in him shift, the same frequency change she had noticed at the clinic. Impossibly practical, he said. She could fix anything, appliances, furniture, arguments. She used to say that most problems persist because people are afraid to open them up and look at the parts. She sounds remarkable. She was. He turned to look at her. She would have liked you. She had a particular respect for people who kept working while they were falling apart. Lena felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Something simple and warm and careful, the way small things are careful when they are just beginning. My daughter draws pictures of the clinic, she said. I know. Sandra showed me one. I think it's on the fridge in the break room now. Abby put it there herself. Lena paused. She asked me last week if this was where we were going to stay. I didn't know what to tell her. Vincent turned to face her fully. What did you want to tell her? Lena thought about the yellow sheets, about the coffee maker, about Sandra handing her a chart without a question, about Frank, the elderly man with the cough, who had seen the specialist last week and been diagnosed with something manageable, not the something worse she had feared, about standing up straight in a food bank line because she refused to let herself disappear, even when disappearing would have been easier. I wanted to tell her yes, she said. Vincent said nothing for a moment. Then tell her yes, he said quietly. Spring came late to Toronto that year, the way it sometimes does, reluctantly, in fits and starts, a warm week followed by a cold snap, followed by the morning when you step outside and the air has finally decided. Lena walked to the clinic the morning it decided. She took the long way, along the lake, with Abby trotting beside her, describing a dream she'd had about a yellow submarine that was also a school bus. In that particular stream of consciousness way of children who trust completely the attention of the person next to them. Her license had been fully reinstated for 3 months. She was now lead nurse at the clinic, which had expanded its hours and added 2 more staff. The nursing board had issued a formal statement acknowledging that the complaint against her had been filed under false pretenses, which her lawyer said was unusual, and Vincent said was what happened when people stopped being afraid to look at the parts. She and Vincent had dinner most weeks. Not always, but most weeks. It had started as logistics. They ran the clinic between them in different ways, and there were things that needed discussing, and it had stayed as logistics for about a month before they both stopped pretending that was what it was. He had kissed her on a Thursday evening in February in the clinic parking lot after they spent 40 minutes arguing pleasantly about whether to add an evening hour on Fridays, and she had kissed him back, and then they had gone and had dinner and argued pleasantly about the same thing over pasta until they settled on a pilot of 4 weeks and then adjusted from there. That was how they made decisions. Practically, together, without drama. She liked that about them. She liked that they had built something that made sense. Marcus was in a very different position than he had been in December. His partnership at the firm had dissolved. 2 civil cases had proceeded with Catherine's involvement. He was not in prison. Lena didn't need that, didn't want that, had looked at it and decided she wanted to spend her energy somewhere other than his consequence. But he was not untouchable anymore, and the people who had helped him be untouchable were being looked at more carefully, which was its own variety of justice. He had not contacted her. The restraining order stood. She thought about him less every week, which she had been told would happen, and had not quite believed until it did. On a Tuesday in May, she was finishing the last chart of the day when Vincent appeared in her office doorway. He had paint on his left hand from something he'd been doing in the supply room. He had replaced 3 shelving units himself over the last week, because, he said, the contractor they'd used the first time hadn't done them correctly. And also because it was something to do with his hands. "There's something I want to show you," he said. "The shelves," she said. "Not the shelves. Come with me." He drove them east, out toward the beaches. She watched the city shift around them, the lake appearing between buildings. Abby was at a friend's, a real friend, a girl from her new school named Margot, who had a trampoline and a patient father. And the evening was warm enough for open windows. He pulled up in front of a house on a quiet street 3 blocks from the water. Victorian, wide porch, old trees in the front yard that would be extraordinary in another month. "It needs work," he said. "The kitchen is a project. One of the bathrooms is a project. The garden is an emergency." Lena looked at the house. Then at him, "Vincent." "I'm not assuming anything," he said quickly. "I'm showing you. Because you said your daughter wanted to know if you were staying, and I would like very much to ask you both to stay. Not in the apartment, which was always temporary. Somewhere that's yours. Somewhere you can argue with the garden and put your things in the cupboards and have a place on the wall for Abby's drawings." He paused. "Somewhere that we could, if you wanted, share. Eventually. On a timeline that makes sense to you." He was nervous again. She had come to recognize it now. Not visible to most people, but there in the slight forward lean, the hands that were not quite still. She got out of the car and stood on the sidewalk. She thought about the Parkade, the heating vent, the weight of Abby sleeping against her side in the cold, the particular quality of the morning she had stood in a food bank line with a straight back, because she was not going to let herself disappear. She thought about a man at a window with a coffee cup who had seen her standing there and decided that it mattered. She walked up the front steps and put her hand on the wooden railing. It was solid, old wood, the kind that had held through many winters. There were marks on the doorframe at various heights, someone else's children measured over years, small pencil marks with dates beside them. She thought about Abby, taller every week, drawing pictures of places she felt safe. She thought about what it meant to choose something instead of having everything chosen for you. What it felt like to look at a future and reach toward it on purpose with both hands, knowing what you were doing. She turned around. "Show me the kitchen," she said. He smiled, and it was the same smile she had seen in the parking lot in February, the one that made him look like someone who had stopped being surprised by his own happiness and was learning to simply receive it. He walked up the steps and unlocked the door and held it open for her. She walked through. The hallway smelled like old wood and dry plaster, and the faint echo of someone else's life. It smelled like the beginning of something. Lena stood very still for a moment, the way she had learned to stand still. Not to brace, not to survive, but to pay attention, to be present for what was actually here. Then she took a step forward, and another, into the house that was not yet hers but would be. Behind her, Vincent closed the door gently against the spring evening, and the street sounds fell away, and it was quiet, and it was warm, and it was theirs.